Hi, this is Benjamin Brain and welcome to the NXTGEN show. So my mission is to share with you the experiences and the stories of next generation owners, entrepreneurs and leaders of family-run businesses from around the globe of all shapes and sizes. On today's show, I was honoured to be joined by Helen Wathall MBE. Now, a quick introduction to Helen. She's actually the fifth generation of her family to run the family business, established all the way back in 1858, over 164 years ago. They've now become Derby's longest established independent funeral directors. Originally, Helen had planned a career in farming. She joined the business temporarily, like so many of us do with the family business, when she was 18 and gained experience in every aspect of the business before unexpectedly having to take over as managing director at the age of just 29. Since then, she's been one of the industry's vanguard female leaders, including becoming the first woman president of the Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors, which represents more than 1,000 family-owned firms, and the first female director of Golden Charter, the UK's largest funeral plan provider, a post she held for 6 years before finishing up in December 2021. Now, during her tenure as managing director of Wathalls, Helen has expanded the branch network to 7 offices and has also developed many new areas of the business. Most notably, the award-winning Dandelions Bereavement Support Programme and Buying Artstone Memorials. And that's all part of a goal to provide families with the full service, from prepaid funeral plans and arranging funerals to providing bereavement support and designing and erecting burial and cremation stones. And if that wasn't enough, Helen is also board chair of St Peter's Quarter Business Improvement District. This interview turned out to be another brilliant business interview with an ambitious, passionate, engaging and successful next generation family-run business owner, and I never knew the funeral industry could be so interesting. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Okay, so we're joined by Helen of Wathalls this morning. Thank you for taking some time out, Helen. I've been really excited to talk to you, especially with you being a fifth generation business owner. So we know from the intro that Wathalls was established in 1858, which is, by my estimation, 164 years ago, which is quite some accomplishment, not just being a fifth generation business owner, but to have been in business for that long. So given that it was that long ago, can you tell us sort of the backstory to how it first came about?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, hello, good morning. And I think a lot of funeral directors started in the same way. So this is obviously pre-transport. And we were cabinet makers, and we were able to make the coffins. So we will have been asked to make coffins for people, for families, without using the services of a funeral director. And it just sort of, well, we may as well do this for a business. And those with transport, there's a lot of builders, multi-generation, that were builders in the day, and they were the first to have a truck, and so they could move the coffins to the cemetery, as it was at the time. So we're cabinet makers. We've still got a few bits of furniture hanging around within the family that were made when we were cabinet makers. Wow. But we're just all funeral directors now.
And so was it a conscious decision from your great-great-great-grandfather when he first started the business? Was it always his sort of dream to pass the business on through the generations, or has it just sort of come about that way organically?
I think it's really been a little bit more organic. There's a little bit more to the story on the cabinet makers, because he had so that there was twins that were born, and one of them died, and he went on to arrange his own son's funeral. Wow. And so it sort of it evolved from that. So it was Leonard first, then George, his son, and then his son William Henry. They've all got the same names. He died quite young, actually, same as my dad, who was also William Henry. We've not used that name since. And it then moved on into my granddad's generation, and I had a great uncle, Will, and the First World War got in the way of that. So I think it sort of happened organically, without any ambition to be a long-standing business.
Okay. So we also know then from the intro that you joined the business at 18, but similar to my previous guest on the show, your intention was never really to get stuck in and have a long career in the family business. It was more as a temporary stopgap to try and figure out where you wanted to take your career. What was your plan for yourself at the time, and why did that plan at the time not involve joining the family business? Because it seems to people outside of family businesses such the obvious choice. There's a business there ready for you. Why not take up that opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. My dad wanted to be a vet, and I think he was cajoled into the family business. He was the only the only boy. My granddad was one of 10, 8 girls and 2 boys.
Wow.
And of course, generationally wise, then it would tended to be the males that took over the businesses. My dad was the only boy. Spent years wanting to be a vet. Did his national service, went into the business and stayed. And so he didn't actively. I was never told there was a position. Neither myself or my sister were told that. And I spent many weekends in the car driving around churchyards and on the periphery of the business. But I was always allowed to choose what I wanted to do, and was very active in young farmers when I was younger. And I went to agricultural college. Set off with a mission to become a farm business manager. I love the outdoors and that kind of thing. So did a year's agricultural training, just a basic course, went on to learn, I suppose in those days, secretarial skills. I've got a certificate somewhere that says I can do shorthand, which I've never used. I can't remember any of it, but I did all of that. And it was literally over breakfast one day where my dad's had a lady called Nora who worked for us for years and years and years, and she did the accounts and she was retiring. And Dad said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "Yes, okay." Thinking in my head I'd do it for a couple of years to help my dad out.
Sure.
And then those 2 years became 5 years, as they do. And then unfortunately he took ill. So it was a little bit more difficult for me to leave at that point. But it was, I wasn't held captive as such. I was allowed to choose what I wanted to do. But in me, I think, I wanted to do the right thing. And here I am, 37 years later, still not sure what I want to do.
Or any of us ever.
Yeah.
So your dad at the time when he offered you the job, what do you think were his intentions behind that? Did he do that to sort of help you out to get started in your career, or do you think he really wanted you to be a part of the business for the foreseeable future?
I don't think it was either of those. I think he literally wanted someone to do the accounts, and I was available. I'd finished the secretarial course. It was in the January or December of 1984, and I'd finished the course. And my course at agricultural college about farm business management wasn't due to start until September. So I think I was under his feet a little bit. And but in the main, I think he genuinely just wanted someone to do the accounts, and that's what I went to do.
Yeah. And at what sort of level did you join the business? Was it the sort of, you came in, you had to start with all the sort of the task at the bottom of the business and then work your way to the top? Did you, or did you come in at a higher position, obviously being a member of the family that owns the business?
No, I came in, took over the cleaning, and sort of learnt. I learned, as time went on. I literally did do the cleaning and the accounts for a wee while. Dad, I remember now, Dad used to, he wouldn't let me post the accounts until he'd checked them. And when I'd proved that I could get them right, he allowed me to put them in the post. I then progressed on to arranging funerals, which it wasn't really on my radar, I have to say. And it's a really difficult thing to say as a funeral director, but I really enjoy helping people at that point. I get a lot of satisfaction is the wrong word, but being able to help people from a point of the unknown and grief into a position where they've got a little bit of structure around the funeral itself, and hearing all the tales from people. I love in Derby, small city on a global scale. There's people that have done some amazing things that live in the most unassuming lives. And I
Yeah,
love hearing those tales.
I can imagine you're quite an interesting person to sit next to at a dinner party with all the stories you must have.
Yeah. I don't always say I'm a funeral director, I have to say.
So you quickly rose through the ranks, and again, we know from the intro that you took over as managing director at the young age of just 29. So clearly, you had some real drive, ambition. You wanted to progress your career quickly. Thinking back before you actually joined the business, before you were 18, can you remember showing any sort of entrepreneurial flair or any signs that you would become that sort of managing director and take the business to where you are today?
I think two points really there. So I sort of ended up at 29 as the managing director because my dad died, and it was by default as opposed to any particular drive from me. I worked for him for 5 years, and then with him for the last 5 years, and then he sadly passed away quite young. So I wouldn't say that it was a drive within me to land in this position, but I have to say that if I look back, my time within Young Farmers, for example, I can use that as an example where I've always been a doer. And sort of see something wants fixing. How do we fix it and get on with that? So I ended up being the chairman of that and the secretary of that, and and that kind of thing. So I've never been afraid to say yes to things, which I think is sort of led me to the sort of the position that I'm in today. I don't like to see things being done in the wrong way. If there's an easier way, and if I can help, in any way, doesn't matter what it is, I'll always offer.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned earlier on you've got a sister as well. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. But she's not in the business at all.
Okay.
So it's just me who's come into the business, and I've got 3 children.
Yeah.
And two of them, the 2 girls, work with me. It's not for me, with me.
Okay. So already planning for the 6th generation.
So yes, I've got a granddaughter and a grandson as well now. So the 7th generation is they're stacking up behind me a little bit. But my son he's fled the nest and gone to study in Canada for a wee while.
Wow. Has he got any ambitions to join later on in life, or he's taking his own path?
I sort of did the same as my dad did. A position within the company was not a given for any of them. And I really wanted them to ask me. And there was when my partner sadly passed away 6 years ago now. It was just the time was right. So both of them started at around that time, and they both actually now look after the future of the business. Beck, my eldest, does the business development side of everything, which is anything that's with any idea that we have, she progresses, and Charlotte looks after the prepaid funeral plans, which again is the future funerals that we will be doing.
Yeah,
so I think that's quite apt.
So in terms of your daughter's progression in the business, when you think of sort of a long term, are you consciously putting the steps in place now to help them learn the parts of the business that they need to learn so that one day they can maybe take it over? Or is it just sort of growing more organically and you're going more with the flow as to where they sort of enjoy the business most and where they want to be a part of the business?
There's an element of the latter bit there. I think, you can only ever play to your strengths, and in a family business, you're the next MD is already there, regardless of their qualities, and so I think we are more organically just moving forwards, and we will end up where we end up with it, because it's. I don't want them to feel in any way obligated to become the 6th generation that runs the business, but by the same scale, it's there and for the taking when I decide to stop. So it will evolve into what it evolves into.
Okay, yeah, sure, absolutely, that makes sense. And going back to when you first joined the business, I suppose it's always difficult to provide a comparison when your career has been Wathalls. You've not been in a position elsewhere. But how did the rest of the business take to you coming on board as the the fifth generation, the current owner's daughter? Did they take kindly to that, or did you feel you had more eyes on you, so you had to work harder and prove yourself more, or how did you deal with that, and how did you feel about it at the time?
I think so. At the time, there weren't many women who worked in the funeral profession.
Sure. Yeah.
With a front-facing role, stroke any at all, which I didn't really notice. I was there, and I sort of just did what I had to do. My dad was probably the strictest.
Okay.
I think I had to work twice as hard for him than other staff members did. But it's very much a team effort. So from everybody else, I didn't feel as if I was in a position that I wouldn't have earned if I'd have applied for the job.
Yeah.
So it was all okay.
Yeah.
I think the hardest bit for me was when he did pass away, and I sort of left work on the Friday as the girl who did the accounts and went back in on the Monday as the person in charge. My dad had a long-standing co-director, John, so I was working with him. But that was the hardest transition.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of pressure, not just for that switch in responsibilities and accountabilities and your position in the business, but having all of that at 29 as well. So obviously a massively challenging time. But how did you deal with that, and what sort of how did you become success? You're obviously successful in the role. What were some of the mechanisms or strategies that you used for your own personal development to be able to go from that accounting role to managing director in such a short time, in the situation that you were in at the time with your father passing away?
Yeah, it was a challenging time, I say, because not only did I walk in, as one of the people in charge on the Monday, but I also had to arrange his funeral as well. Yeah, so it was a challenging time. The team massively supportive behind all of that, and I learned by putting one foot in front of the other, and by learning from mistakes. I think the biggest thing and the best thing that I ever did was joining the trade association, and did that quite early on.
And so for those listeners, including myself, that aren't really au fait on what the trade association is, what is it, and what sort of benefits do you get from being a part of that?
So it's got a very long title. It's called SAIF in short, but it's the Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors, which is for family-owned businesses within the UK. You join it. We got a lot of benefits from it. But the main thing for me was, so I joined, and then I was able to ask other funeral directors all over the country how they did things, because I'm lucky in as much that I'm not in competition with a funeral director in Brighton or Reading or Blackpool, and I got to know people quite well, and I could ask them, how do you deal with this? And they tell me, because there was no threat of me competing with them. So that was the best thing that I did, by accident a little bit, but I got involved with them, and I learned a lot, and then got involved with other things through the trade association, which sort of sparked a bit of an interest in me too. I ended up presenting to government ridiculously, and helping with them with some of their policies, and then I think with my complete inability to say no to things, ended up as president of the trade association with 2 young children, and it was a fantastic year, but a very long one, I have to say.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it's interesting that you say that, because particularly you tend to find in family-run businesses that have been passed from one generation to the next, that have their ways of doing things, and they've always done things the same way. There's always, not always, but there's quite often almost a reluctance to look for help from outside. They see it almost as like a something bad, because, you know, we've done things this way, let's continue to do things this way. Whereas you've approached it with the opposite mindset there. You've actively gone out and asked for help from other people to make it easier for you and to give you some guidance on that. Where did that mindset come from?
I think I'm naturally quite inquisitive. I think so. So that obviously helps. I think it was actually, I would class it as perhaps a failing on myself and my dad's part that led me to that position, because we didn't really talk whilst he was ill about what to do when he died. And I literally did leave as the girl doing the accounts on the Friday and go back in on the Monday. I'm like, right, okay. And I've got people asking me questions. I'm like, this is a bit surreal. But so I think I'm just naturally quite inquisitive. And I think historically, I've just always followed a little bit of a gut instinct. You know, the bereavement services that we run really, it's just proven to be really successful in Derby, came about because I saw a need, and I thought, well, how can I help this, you know, sort of situation? And I looked at what was out there, and there wasn't really anything that I could join in with, because I am at the end of the day a commercial entity, and a lot of the bereavement services are charities. But people were still asking me, you know, where do I go for help? So we started small and set up with the bereavement groups, and then we do programs, and there's counselling now, and Faye, who's my bereavement support coordinator, has written a book, and we collaborate with lots of groups within the city now to sort of feed into their groups with our bereavement support. And that was just a gut feeling that led to all of that, and I enjoy that side of it.
Yeah, I suppose it goes to show you never know what doors are going to open, what other doors once you've opened those doors.
Yeah, no, and I think it's also a little bit about not being afraid to open the door as well and have a look. You know, you can always shut it again, we've done lots of things that, you know, we haven't taken off, but we've that one I often say this, but I am quite proud of that, because it is it was pretty unique within the profession at the time, and a little bit ahead of its time. And I'm really pleased that we've been able to support so many people just quietly, you know, behind the scenes with that.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds amazing. And so going back to the earlier part of the journey, you mentioned earlier that your dad was almost twice as strict with you, and you felt you had to work harder than everybody else. I've got two sort of questions around that. The first one is, it's sort of always easy to look back with hindsight, and at the time, whilst you might not have realised people had good intentions, see them later on down the line. So did you in any way, not resent, but did you feel hard done to that your dad had that attitude towards you? He expected more from you than everybody else back in the olden days, for want of a better phrase, that you can obviously see?
I think, there were times. I can remember one week doing 16 hours worth of overtime. There was a flu epidemic in 1981, and everybody got flu but me in the office. I did 16 hours overtime, and he wouldn't pay me for it. And at the time, I was because I was a family member, but I was literally working for my dad. But I think what it did do is instill in me the right behaviours, because I was determined to it was almost a little bit to that, not to please him, because that's the wrong thing, but I wanted to do things right, and so it did instill the right behaviours in me. And I could potentially, if I'm honest, been a bit lazy if you haven't been like that. So he did the right thing. I didn't always like it. yeah. Well,
I think we all need somebody to keep us accountable, to make sure that we're reaching our full potential, don't we? Otherwise, we all fall back into doing what we're comfortable with, which is usually not best for ourselves. And at that time, how much support? Obviously, he was strict with you, and he wanted to do well, and he had good intentions for, you know, instilling the right ethics and behaviours in you. But how much support did you get from either your dad or other members of the family in the business? Would he sort of give you a challenge and leave you to it? Would he be there if you needed him? What was that sort of relationship like at the time?
He was always encouraging of any team, any staff member, not just me. and we've still got staff members working for me now that used to work for my dad, and they learned very quickly not to ask him a question at 10 to 5 because they would still be listening to the answer at 5:15, having finished work at 5. And he was a very knowledgeable person, and well respected within his generation. And we still get people now come in to arrange a funeral on the back of a talk that he gave, and it's 27 years since he died.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, he was always happy to share wisdom and knowledge and support. And I can still remember the first 2 lines of the periodic table that he taught me over my chemistry homework over several hours, I have to say. I also learned not to ask questions, but
I won't test you on that here, just in case, but I'll definitely take your word for it. and again, sort of, we've not really having worked anywhere else to compare it to, but over the years since you've been in the family business, what do you feel have been personally for you some of the benefits of being a part of that?
I think it sort of goes back to the beginning of like I said, I still can't tell you what I would like to do. I feel as if I've not made that decision yet. But what the events that have sort of happened have led me to is being in a position to be able to look at other things that are on the periphery of the day-to-day work. So I use the trade association for support when he first passed away, and then I was able to get involved and then give back through that. That's sort of all voluntary stuff there. But I've made some lifelong friends through that, funeral directors all over the country, and in fact we're all meeting up next week for the first time in 2 years at the annual AGM, and that'll be really nice to see everybody. And then on the periphery, is the prepaid funeral plans, and for some reason people in Derby were way ahead of the rest of the UK with wanting to pre-plan and prepay for their funerals, likely to do with the fact that my dad used to give these talks to everybody. But I ended up very early days getting involved with them and sort of stayed with that, and then the opportunity arose to go onto the board of Golden Charter, and for me that was it was quite an honour to get that position. I was the first female there too, not by design, just because I put my head down and wanted to get involved, and that has been a massive stretch for me because it's a corporate beast as such, as opposed to Helen, the funeral director from Macklin Street. And I've just finished that role. It was just for 6 years, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, and then clearly, you can hear just in the way that you talk about the business and the industry, you've got a real passion and still a real fire for what you do. And sometimes you find that particularly people that have joined the family business, because they never really had a passion for the industry itself. You said at the beginning your intention wasn't to go into the funeral business, but clearly you've still got a passion now. What was it, 37 years later? So even though the industry wasn't your passion to begin with, how have you maintained that, after all those years, and you're still, growing and being successful and having all these accolades to your name? What keeps you passionate?
And I think it is the periphery stuff. So it's the core of the business and the periphery stuff. So I've always enjoyed listening and talking to people, and I can't say enough how much I've enjoyed listening to some of the stories that I've heard about people that have lived and worked in Derby and where they've travelled and what they've done. Absolutely love that.
Both definitely a podcast in there somewhere.
Yeah, definitely, yes. But then that's through the funerals that they've done, but then also through the prepaid funeral plans, when you've got the person themselves telling you, their story, and then the bereavement support group. So that's probably been my core attraction to the actual business. But then I'm not, ironically, a natural I don't like being the person wearing the top hat in front with everybody looking at me. I'm happy in the kitchen at a party, sure, as a person. And as with any family business, you can't pick your family. And I had to play to my strengths. And you're never too old to learn. I've always learned that from my grandma. You are genuinely never too old to learn. You're never too old to start something. And I've really enjoyed learning from the trade association, growing myself through the prepaid funeral plan work that I've done. And then I'm also chair of the St. Peter's Quarter BID, which is within the community. And that's almost a little bit of a drive to change things within my area that's led to that. So I think it's sort of all ebbed and flowed a lot, but I found my niche within the family business.
Yeah. Okay, and we've talked about some of the positives there. Are there any? And again, it's always easy to look back when you've got hindsight. But have you experienced, or could you see how there might be downsides to working in a family business, especially for those who are, have joined the business and are going through that progression plan now, or have aspirations of joining the family business in the future? Is there anything to maybe be aware of, or any downsides that you've experienced? Obviously, there's been a lot of good stuff, but there's always the other side to the coin as well.
Yeah, I can talk from me personally. The hardest bit was juggling young children as one of the first women in the profession. Not long after my dad died, I got two children when I was president. More for me, I got two children under the age of 7 at the time, and that was the hardest bit. And then it did take me a long time to work out that I don't have to know everything. There's elements of the business that I'm not a natural at, and you can't force a square peg into a round hole, can you? And that's the biggest thing with family businesses. It's sort of finding your niche and being able to run with it. But definitely juggling unexpectedly the business and a young family was probably the hardest time for me. And hindsight says that I would have dealt with that differently. I would have made more time. I would have taken on more help and made more time for me as a person and the family. Although my children are all quite resilient, there's not much they can't do because they've had to. So there's a positive in there as well.
Silver lining, most definitely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there a really important lesson was you discovering for yourself that you don't have to know everything. What was the situation and the feelings you were going through before that versus the changes that you made after you suddenly had that sort of light bulb moment? What was the difference between post and?
I think so as I've just said, I'm not a natural in a top hat with everybody looking at me. I'm happy to do absolutely everything until that point. And I tried for a long time to force myself into that role, because that's what a funeral director does. That's what people perceive the funeral director. Whereas actually, whilst it is a very important bit, that's the tip of the iceberg on the rest of the work that we do. And I still will do that if I'm asked to do it, but it's not my thing. Anybody they're always better having somebody else do that rather than me. And I didn't quite throw the towel in. I can't do this. This is not my thing. And then it led me to then look at the other areas of the business that, what I like to think is quite good at is seeing what's coming down the line. Where are the trends? What people are looking for? And I've been fortunate to have been the generation that has seen the onset of digital and the impact that that's had on our profession. When I first started, every funeral was always different, and every funeral was exactly as the family had told us they wanted it, but they were also pretty much all the same. We've always done anything that anybody wants as long as it's legal. That's the internal memo, that we've had running through the last 4 generations.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter whether they want to almost not have a funeral at all and want to dispose of the person who's passed away, to the grandest, most flamboyant funeral in existence. We will do it. And the impact that digital has had on the entire profession, not just us, is that what people can have is more widely available. We've always been able to do all of these things, but people weren't necessarily as aware. Funerals have changed. The core is still exactly the same, but funerals themselves have changed, and we are probably more event planner now than anything else.
Sure. Okay, so that transition then from you realizing that it wasn't your zone of genius to be the funeral director, the face of the business, the one who's putting themselves out there. What change did you make so that you could step back from that? Was it just a case of giving that position to somebody else in the business, or did you bring somebody on board specifically to take over that role? What did you do at the time? I know it was quite a while back now, so if you could remember.
Well, see, we've always had, we're quite a large independent funeral director. One of the first things I learned actually when I got involved with the trade association was that at that time we were most likely the largest single branch funeral director in the country.
Wow.
It took me many months to get my own head around that. It scared me, I have to say, because I've sort of grown up with it and thought it was normal.
Yeah.
But because of the size, we've always had other people that have been out and conducted funerals. Anybody can sort of pretty much do anybody's role. I've got a team of 41 now, so it's quite a big team of people.
Yeah.
Back then it was probably just over 20, I'd like to say. I stepped back and others stepped in and filled the role. I can't conduct all of the funerals anyway. We do about 1,000 funerals a year, so I can't conduct them all anyway. And I sort of just stepped out and in the first instance just made myself unavailable, and then it naturally stopped. But I think my natural talents are more in the strategic stuff, and with the changes that we've seen over the past 20-25 years, staying one step ahead of any trends and that kind of thing has been my role, more than anything else.
And clearly that served the business really well with the success. 1,000 funerals a year, largest at the time single branch funeral agency in the country. It's some good going, but you've got me intrigued, and it might be slightly off tangent, and I'm not even sure if you'd be able to share it, but you mentioned a moment ago about funeral requests, and I've got to ask, what's the single most bizarre or extreme request you've had for a funeral, without having to name any names?
Well, I mean, you can pretty much name it, and we've done it over the years. I don't think there is a single one. I mean, recently we've done a funeral where in fact, there's a couple recently where our funeral director, they wanted him to dress up as a Viking. And so we hired a costume, and he led the profession dressed as a Viking.
Nice.
We've had I mean, there's all sorts of things. There was Darth Vader the other week, and about 50 stormtroopers in a procession through a small town in Derbyshire.
Wow.
That was at the request of the person who died. That's what he wanted, and we accommodated that. In fact, we had a bit of a giggle at the time, and the family are aware of this because the guy who conducted that funeral's not overly tall, and we thought he could be R2D2, but he wasn't so keen. And we do all sorts of things like that. Musical requests. There's themes. There's And yeah, with the onset of digital, you know, and the portrayal of imagery during the service, you know,
Yeah.
we can do all of that. We've had fly past. You know, a person was a pilot, and that I actually conducted that funeral. That was really moving. Walking down quite a long drive in front of the procession, and a couple of, it's making me emotional now, a couple of planes flew over and they dipped their wings right over the top of me as a mark of respect to the funeral profession.
Wow.
Yeah, so from that scale to the smallest of things.
Yeah, so that internal core value that you said has been a part of the business for 4 generations, that we cater to any request so long as it's legal. You really do live by that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. It's a sort of, you know, we get asked something that's slightly out of normal, you know, right, is this legal? Yeah, okay, how do we do it? You know, we've just always done that, and I really like to see the changes that have happened in funerals. When I first started, it was pretty much the funerals. They even had the same hymns. You know, it was just the same the same hymns, and you know, now music plays such a big part in it all.
I had no idea could be so creative. You've definitely, hopefully prematurely, but thinking about my own send off and stormtroopers and flyovers, I think I'm gonna have to.
We all know that. I would hope that my legacy to the company will be the biggest thing that I think I'd love people to do is to talk to their families about what they want. Death, it happens to us all.
Yeah.
And there is no. Well, there's no guarantee if you're 3 years and 10. You know, anything can happen, and I think you know, the saddest part of the job is you know, family come in and the first question we ask is, do you want burial or cremation? And if they've not had that conversation with the person who's died, they can't answer the question, and the only person who can answer it can't, because they've died. And that causes so much distress. We see that on a daily basis. So my legacy would be that everybody talks to their family members about what they want for their funeral.
No.
Even at its basic, burial or cremation, that's just a start. You know, some people like to think that the funeral is for the living. Some people like it to be the mark of respect to the deceased. And you know, if without having the conversation, you don't know how someone feels.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, I love the fact that you thought about the legacy and the impact that you want to leave on the business in the future as well. That's when you talk about you're a forward thinker, you can really see that. You know, you're talking about not just about the plans for the business, but your plans for yourself and the mark that you want to leave. It's really impressive. So, and again, we've mentioned hindsight a couple of times, but I think always that's best where we can find the best lessons. So if you could go back to 18-year-old Helen when she first joined the business, and having seen how the business has grown, having been through the ups and the downs and the challenges, and being thrown into that position of managing director, you know, unexpectedly at the age of 29, and all the success you've achieved since then, if you could visit 18-year-old Helen and you could give her just one piece of advice that you think would see her do best, what would you say to her?
Gosh, so there's lots, actually, I have to say.
That's the hardest part, isn't it?
Probably more on a personal note than anything else. But I think I would have spoken to my dad more about running a business. I think I've sort of touched on this a little bit before. You know, so I was just working in it. You know, he was ill for a number of years, and we didn't really talk in his last months about the difference between working in the business and running it. And I think, that's what I probably regret that more than anything else. And hindsight has taught me that I should have, because I had to reinvent the wheel. After he died, and I made probably the same mistakes that he made. He would have answered if I had asked.
And so that distinction between working in the business versus working on it, if you had not necessarily the support, but that conscious training or developing in that area of the business before you got to the point of being the managing director. What difference do you think it would have made had you had that?
I think it would have given me in the early days more confidence in my own convictions. I think, because I literally sort of stepped out on that Friday at a level with everybody, and then walked back in a level up.
Yeah.
But without the confidence or the knowledge. I am by nature. I like to do the right thing by people. I am, you calling me a people pleaser, I suppose, but I naturally want to help people. And it doesn't necessarily lend itself to being in charge of people in the short term. So it would have given me that little bit more confidence to make a decision and run with it. And it took me a long time to gain that confidence. I think I'd always got the ideas, but having the confidence to run with them took me longer than I would have had if I'd had some conversations with my dad about the difference between the two.
Yeah, and you mentioned confidence there. And I don't think there's anybody that's going to watch this back or listen to the podcast that would disagree with the fact that you're clearly quite a confident, accomplished, successful business owner now. Where did the confidence come from? Was it something that you had to work on consciously?
Massively
over time.
Yeah, I'm still happy in the kitchen at parties. I am that person. Give me a job to do, I'll be there for hours. I'm quite happy. I'm still that person. I think I've got my two girls working for me now. I was elected the president of the trade association. I earned the job on the board at the prepaid planning company.
Yeah.
I've learned, that life is a lot easier if you say what you think, rather than fudging around a topic.
Yeah.
And so it's taken me a long time. I'm 55 now, and it's in recent times that I've probably aged, I suppose. But I'm just sort of admitting now I'm not afraid to say what I think, and we'll work through a topic rather than bury it. So.
Yeah. Okay. No, some really good insights there. I love that. Just say what you think, definitely.
Yeah.
And the conversation that led to that was about having more knowledge and experience of the working on the business versus the working in the business. Is that something that you're consciously working with your daughters that are in the business now as well to prepare them later on in life, or are they not quite at that stage yet?
They're not quite at that stage yet. I've got a really good management team of which they are part of, but not in an operational way. As I said, their roles have morphed over the past 6 years into the roles that they're in now, and I think they are in a really good fit because they are looking after the future of the business. And I have to say, we work together. We don't necessarily talk shop out of work. In fact, one of the things that I lost the most when they started working for me was we usually sit and natter over the tea table about the day. And of course, can't do that now because we're just talking about work again. So I actually found that really hard. I lost the
mother-daughter relationship. Colleague to colleague. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because now I have to listen to their opinions because they're working. So that was.
How do you think they describe you as a boss?
Well, Beck actually originally came in as my PA, and she describes me as unPA-able. So we get on well, I have to say. And again, I've brought them up to be not afraid to say what they think and to have a conversation around things, which sometimes bites me from behind. But I'm really proud of who they are and who they're both becoming, and Hugo too, who's as I say, flown the nest. Probably because there's too many girls, I think. But we all work we work together, and I think I do try to show them what it is that I actually do.
Yeah.
So if I ever got run over by a bus, they're not in the situation that I was in when my dad died.
Yeah.
They'll be able to, the business in theory will run itself without me. Now I've worked quite hard at that, which gives me the time to go off and do all of these random things, but also to focus on the future of the business too.
Most definitely. And you've raised some interesting points there. For a next generation family member that's coming into the business, it's not just challenges for them as a member of the family, it's also challenging for the current family owners. And you mentioned there about losing that sort of conversation over the kitchen table and how it affects relationships with your daughters and your sons. So if you could give one piece of advice to a business owner who has intentions of bringing their children into the business at some stage, what would you say?
I think this is a really difficult question because I'm sort of, so my mum is actually still company chairman, so I'm technically still that person in lots of ways. She's 91 and
wow.
And is she's not involved obviously in the day-to-day running on any level, but I technically work for my mum, I suppose. I think it's a really difficult area because you have the element of we've always done it this way, so why change it?
Yeah,
which I think is potentially sort of more my mum's generation. I'm still sort of finding my feet in what I would like to bring in, and then I've now got my daughters in particular snapping at my heels, wanting to make changes. And I think the one piece of advice is all about communication. The second you get a hidden agenda, especially within a family, and we're actually not like this, but you get a hidden agenda, and then you get secrets, and then you get defensiveness, and that kind of thing. So I think it is all about communication both ways, and I need to be clear with my family about what I would like and what I would like to see. They need to be clear and be able to say to me, that's a really stupid idea, what are you thinking of that for? We need to have that communication.
So it's that honest conflict instead of that sort of dishonest harmony where you say there's all sorts of ulterior agendas and passive aggressiveness going on under the surface that nobody actually ever explores. And
then I think if I could have touched on this a little bit, if I could sneak in a second piece, that peer-to-peer advice is for me has been a godsend. As I've made friends in funeral directors all over the country, and I can pick up the phone to any number of them and say, how would you do this? Or this has happened, what do you think? And they'll always give me an answer, and I'm lucky in our profession that I can do that. And I found that has been for me the best thing that I've done. In my journey.
Two really brilliant pieces of advice there that I'm sure are going to save a lot of people a lot of heartache and frustration in the future if they're listening. So I've got a million questions I could ask you right now. My brain is buzzing, but I'm conscious of your time and we're getting on for an hour. So I'm going to whittle it down to a couple. And the first one really is, over your career, since you joined the business, and there's going to be many again, and probably the most challenging things about my interviews is I'm always asking for the one thing when there could be so many, but it gives you a chance to reflect on your own journey as well, which we actually rarely get to do. But if you could pick your proudest moment so far, the one that really sticks out for whatever reason it might be over that 37-year career, what would you say it was?
I have to say, and it is something actually that may seem quite small to other people, but it's my proudest moment is sitting with a gentleman whose wife had died, and she didn't want anybody at her funeral. And so there was me, him, and the vicar in the chapel, and he asked me to come in with him because he didn't want to be on his own. And that to me sums up the entire journey. Was that 20 minutes in that chapel where I was able to sit with him, complete stranger, and be with him and listen to the tale about his wife. That was such an honor, and also pleased that I was able to be there for him. So I'd say, ironically, that unseen moment is probably my proudest moment.
Wow.
That sums up what we do, in every way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really nice moment. Thank you for sharing this. You've got my hairs up on the back of my neck. So to go from that quite emotional place back to business, and my final sort of question for the interview, you mentioned something a few moments back which really sort of pricked my ears up, and you said that you've managed to get the business to a position now where it works without you, which so many family owners never actually get to the point of. They end up being trapped by the business, right up until the end, and then they can't sell it because it relies on them so much, and they've got really nowhere to go. So again, summarizing, if you could give one piece of advice to a business owner to get to that position that you're in now, which so many of us strive for but never actually figure out how to get to, what would you say has been the difference for your journey?
Well, I think so. I was, because my dad died and I hadn't had those conversations, I was that person, and I've been determined all the way through this that I wasn't going to be that person to my children.
Yeah.
So I sort of learned by default. I think there's a couple of bits. I think have a vision. Have a vision, and you can have a family vision as well as a company vision, but have a vision which is shared where appropriate with the whole team. Make it detailed. It's not just 5 words on a piece of paper that's stuck on the wall that nobody looks at. It's, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. Stretch yourself as far as you can in that vision, and then take the team on the journey. And I think that I'm not quite there with that. I've got the generation behind me pushing me for that. I've got it here in my head.
But your sights are set, and that's the way that you're heading.
Yeah. And I think you've just got to be brave and determined. And again, it's all about having the confidence in your gut feelings, what you feel is the right thing to do, and then acting on them and taking bold steps. I think it's not being afraid to put your head above the wall and see what's happening out there, and where can you make a difference, and what can you do better, easier, quicker, more efficiently, and that kind of thing. But the whole sort of vision thing, you think, we're about basically a backstreet funeral director in a nutshell, but we've got a vision. And we're not global. We're not aiming to be global or national or even regional, but within our little area, we've got a vision that we're working towards.
Well, and that's it. The direction, everybody's on board, and even if you don't get there, you'll be a hell of a lot closer than if you hadn't had it in the first place. And everybody's vision is different. Some might want to be those global, world dominating businesses, others might not to it. It's what works for you as the individual, as the owner of the business. I think that's sorry, go.
No, that was it.
I think that's some real sage advice, and a great place to bring the interview to an end. So I just want to thank you for sharing your time and sharing some really brilliant stories with us. I've genuinely been fascinated. I never knew how interesting the funeral professional industry was. So you've opened my eyes to it, and you've shared, some real brilliant advice that I'm sure is going to be well received by a lot of people who have been in similar positions or in a similar position to yourself at the moment. So my last question for today, then there's no pressure on this one. It's if anybody wants to find out more about Helen, if they want to follow you online or find out more about Wathalls, whereabouts can we find you? And any links that you share, I'll stick them in the show notes. So if anyone wants to click on them, then they'll be there.
We're all about Wathalls, really. So the website is wathalls.co.uk.
And that's WATHALLS.co.uk.
So and then it's the same. Search Wathalls on all of the social media mediums. There's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then I'm just Helen Wathall on LinkedIn as well.
So everybody, make sure you check those links out and give Helen and Wathalls a follow and check out the website. Well, that brings it to an end. Like I say, Helen, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've learned a lot myself. Thanks for being so honest and open, and for sharing a good chunk of your time with us this morning. So I'll leave you to it and see you soon, and best of luck for the future of Wathalls and your two daughters taking it to a new level as well.
Thank you very much, Ben. I've enjoyed talking to you.